If I had to choose a favorite thing to grow in my summer garden, it would be tomatoes. And I think tomatoes are probably the most popular thing to grow in summer gardens. And I also love trying new varieties every year. But sometimes they're a little bit disappointing, and sometimes they're really delicious. And I thought that I would save you the time by doing a taste test for you of all of the new varieties that I have tried so far in my garden this summer. I'm going to be sharing some characteristics with you, like whether they're determinate or indeterminate, their growth habit, whether they need support, but most importantly, I'm going to be sharing with you the flavor of my top picks. Let's get right into this taste test because I cannot wait to eat more tomatoes. I love garden tomatoes so much that I will eat them pretty much for every meal. Yesterday I had them for breakfast, lunch, and dinner alongside everything else that I ate, and I do not feel any regret over that because garden tomatoes don't last forever, and so it's really nice to be able to enjoy them while they're fresh. So let's get into tasting these tomatoes so that you can get some ideas for what you'd like to grow in your monsoon garden this year, or maybe if you're planning your spring garden already and ordering seeds and making your plan, you can include some of these in your garden for that time. The first one is the Moonglow tomato, and it is an orange tomato. I got these seeds from Seed Savers Exchange, and this one happened to be the winner for the taste test in 2007 for Seed Savers Exchange. So that already clues you in that it is a very delicious tomato. It's called the Moonglow, and it is an orange tomato, and it is so good. So I am going to cut into this. We're going to taste it. So this is a much smaller one, but I got one just a couple of days ago that was really, really big. It was probably a little bit bigger than baseball size, to give you an idea. I didn't weigh it, although that would have been a great idea, but this is juicy and it is flavorful, and I just absolutely love this tomato. If I had to pick a favorite for the new varieties of tomatoes that I tried this year, I would be hard pressed to pick just one, but there are two that I have in mind. This is one of them, and the other one you're going to have to wait for coming up because it is going to be on my taste test list today too. So I've got this all cut up, and it is so juicy. It is dripping all over my cutting board, and I can smell the tomato aroma. And if I give it a taste, it's a little bit sweet, but mostly that classic tomato flavor. It's not mealy at all. It's got the perfect consistency, the perfect amount of juice. It's got very few seeds, which is really nice. And it's just a really good all-around tomato. Very low acid. So if you have trouble with your stomach or you have trouble with eating tomatoes, this one might be a great one for you if you're looking for a tomato that has a low acid. The Moonglow tomato is an indeterminate tomato, which means that it will continue to grow and produce fruits throughout the entire season until it is killed by frost. And the days to maturity are 85 days. And it's really important to pay attention to days to maturity when you're growing in conditions that are a little bit limited as far as time goes. So in the desert, we can grow tomatoes beginning in late February or early March, depending on exactly where you are, all the way until it gets too hot for the fruits to ripen. And we can also grow a second batch of tomatoes during monsoon season, which is starting in mid-July or so through September. And that gives us another chance at growing tomatoes in our summer gardens. But in other areas, if you're watching from someplace like Colorado that has a really short growing season, you definitely want to choose a tomato that has a lower number of days to maturity. This one is a little bit long at 85 days, but I started these seeds in the house in December, and I had these planted out with some frost protection in late February, and I was able to get fruits for these. They started producing fruits a couple of weeks ago. Moonglow tomatoes will give you a fruit that's roughly 6 to 8 ounces, so that is a really, really nice tomato. If you get an 8-ounce tomato, that's like a half-pound tomato, and it is a really delicious one for sure. You will need supports for this because it's an indeterminate tomato, so use a tomato cage or stakes or something like that because it will get big and bushy and continue to grow throughout the season. If you have any questions on any of the descriptions that I'm providing here, like determinate or indeterminate or hybrid versus heirloom, I did an entire tomato growing series, and in each one I highlighted different aspects like tomato type, like determinate and indeterminate, as well as the differences between hybrid, GMO, heirloom, open pollinated, and everything else that you need to know about growing tomatoes. So I will link those videos below in the description box for you in case you want to go check those out and refresh your memory. With this Moonglow tomato, you can use this for pretty much any use. You can freeze it, you can dehydrate it, you can make a sauce out of it, you can eat it fresh. So pretty much anything that you want to do, this is a great all-around tomato, as long as you get it in the ground in time so that it can produce those fruits within 85 days. The next one that I want to talk about is a really beautiful tomato with a pretty unique name. It looks kind of like a Roma style tomato. It's an elongated light yellow tomato. And this tomato was originally bred by a Seed Savers Exchange member under the name of Banana Cream. But later on, it was sold by Baker Creek under the name Cream Sausage. So if you're looking for seeds for this tomato, I got mine from Seed Savers Exchange, but you can also find it at Baker Creek, and I think Botanical Interests too, and probably some other companies as well. But this is going to be sold under the name Cream Sausage. The Cream Sausage tomato is a determinate tomato, which means that it is going to ripen its fruits all around the same time over a couple of week time period. So you definitely want to be around to be able to harvest and process those, because when they start to ripen, they're all going to kind of ripen at the same time. And if you are trying to preserve, can, freeze, or whatever, that's actually really convenient in some ways, because you will get them all at once and then you can process them and be done with them rather than having to deal with them over the entire summer. The days to maturity for this tomato is 80 days from transplant, and so you want to make sure that you have enough time to get that transplant in the ground and then get fruit before it gets either too hot or too cold, depending on where you are. This Cream Sausage tomato is a determinate tomato, so you don't necessarily have to provide support for it, but as the fruit started coming on and developing, it became pretty apparent to me that it was going to need some support, because there was so much fruit that the branches were getting weighed down, and I was afraid that they were going to break. So I did end up putting a basket around this tomato just to support it for that reason. Like I said, it had so much fruit on it, it was unbelievable. So if you're looking for a tomato that is going to give you pounds of fruit, this is a great choice. Now, I'm going to cut this open and I'm going to show you what it looks like. This tomato is very juicy and it's got a few seeds, but not a ton. It has a very light classic tomato flavor, not too sweet. It's actually a very light flavor, so I wouldn't say it's the most intense, most flavorful tomato that I have tried, but what it lacks in intense flavor, it makes up for in productivity. And so if you're looking for a very productive tomato, like I said, this is a really nice tomato. I have roasted it and I have eaten it fresh, but I have not tried any other preparation methods for this. From what I understand from the descriptions on the websites, it's a pretty good tomato for any purpose that you would want to use it for. So I would highly recommend this one as well, particularly if you're growing in a small space and you want a tomato that is a larger tomato, something other than a cherry, that will give you a lot of fruit. So that, once again, is the Cream Sausage tomato, and I would highly recommend that one. The next tomato I want to talk about is called the Thornburn's Terra-Cotta, and that's a pretty funny name, but this tomato actually has a very long history. It was developed in the 1890s by a man from New York, and it is a semi-determinate tomato, which means that it has qualities of both a determinate and an indeterminate tomato. So it will produce over a longer period of time than the classic determinate tomato, like my Cream Sausage tomato I was just talking about. You'll get an initial flush of heavy production, and then it will probably continue to give you a few tomatoes after that, which is why it's called a semi-determinate. It did get pretty tall, so I ended up using stakes to support the tomato plant, so you'll want to provide a little bit of support for it. But it was a relatively compact plant, really. It did get tall, but it didn't sprawl and produce a ton of side shoots like a lot of indeterminate tomatoes would. Now, this is my other tomato that is probably my favorite based on flavor. So I told you that I really loved the Moonglow tomato. That was the first vibrant orange tomato that we opened with, but this one is my second favorite as far as flavor for the new varieties for this season. It is very sweet. I'm going to cut this open for you. It's got kind of a green seed mass really, and it is an orange, and it's got a little flush of red in the center. It's just really beautiful. It's juicy, not a ton of seeds, but definitely more than the cream sausage or the Moonglow, and it is so good. So let me just use this excuse to taste another tomato. This Thornburn's Terra-Cotta is interesting because it has the classic tomato flavor. It's a little bit sweet, but it's also got a bit of an earthy, maybe a smoky flavor to it really. So it is really unique and so juicy and really delicious. This tomato is 75 days to maturity, so you want to get that transplant in the ground and allow at least 75 days if you're going to get some fruit off of it. So that's a little bit shorter than the first two. So we're moving in the right direction when it comes to shorter number of days to maturity. I would highly recommend this one. It was really productive. Maybe not as productive as the cream sausage, but it was very productive for sure. I've gotten probably a dozen tomatoes off of one of the plants that I'm growing over in my 4x4 beds. If you have a small growing space, you could probably put this into a larger pot or a grow bag, or if you have a raised bed, you could definitely grow this plant in a smaller space like that, as long as you have support for it. This next one is an oldie but a goodie for me. It is one that I have shared in previous videos that I will always have in my garden. It is a staple tomato if you're growing in hot conditions, and this is the Punta Banda tomato. It is a cocktail sized tomato, so it's a little bit bigger than a cherry tomato, but it's not as big as, say, a slicer tomato. So this is about the size of it. It's not too bad. And let me cut this open. They have been doing so well this year. They have a very, very vibrant red color, and they are super juicy. They are great for dehydrating. I have dehydrated them. I actually still have some in my pantry that I dehydrated last year, and so I was kind of savoring them throughout the winter time, but now that I have more coming in, I am just eating as many as I want to. So it's all about eating tomatoes around my house right now, for sure. These seeds were collected on the coast of Baja California, and I got these seeds from Native Seed Search. This has been classified on some websites as a semi-determinate plant, which means that it will give you a first flush of a lot of fruit, but then it will continue to produce lately throughout the rest of the season. Other websites consider this to be a determinate plant, which means that it will just provide one flush and be done. But I would have to say, after growing this for several years, that I would agree with the semi-determinate status, because I do get a really heavy flush of fruits in the beginning, and then it will produce lightly throughout the season. So I think that I would agree with the semi-determinate classification. This plant I have grown with no support. It seems to be completely happy sprawling along the ground. It will just bush and kind of crawl, so you need to provide a little bit of space for it. Although I have staked it, it seems to do better without support and being able to just freely go where it wants to go. I collect dozens of tomatoes off of these plants every day for the first few weeks, and then after that a pretty reasonable amount. I don't cover it. I don't provide shade cloth for it. It is a really friendly, low maintenance plant. I haven't had any trouble with diseases or pests with this plant, and it doesn't seem to mind the desert temperatures at all. It just produces really juicy, flavorful tomatoes throughout the entire summer season. So if you're looking for one true bet, the Punta Banda is the one for you, for sure. The days to maturity on this Punta Banda is 68 days, so we are getting a little towards the lower side when it comes to days to maturity, so this is a really, really good one. I have been saving the seeds from this one for a very long time, and they just seem to keep getting better, and I think that's because it's really starting to adapt to the specific microclimate in my yard. So you might want to think about saving the seeds for this one. The next tomato is the Apricot Zebra. Now I say apricot because I'm from southwestern Ohio and that's how we say it there. But if you want to call it Apricot Zebra, then you are more than welcome to. These are a smaller cocktail-sized tomato as well. When they first come on the plant, they are green with a darker green stripe, and as they ripen, they become this beautiful tangerine color, and then the stripes are a lighter orange or yellow color, so they're just very pretty. These are an indeterminate tomato, and the days to maturity on this one is 65 days, so we're getting even shorter. And I have grown this one for 3 seasons now, and I absolutely love this tomato. The Apricot Zebra produces so many fruits. These are a cocktail-sized tomato. I am not the only one who enjoys this tomato in my garden. I think I have a pack rat that has set up shop in my garden someplace. I have not caught him yet, but he loves these tomatoes too. And these are his go-to tomatoes. I find little nibbles out of these tomatoes and no other tomatoes in my garden. And I'm probably growing 20 different varieties of tomatoes. I actually haven't counted how many varieties, but it is a lot. And these are his go-to tomatoes. These are so sweet and delicious. They don't have very many seeds. I end up just eating these fresh. I will cut them up and put them on a plate or put them in a salad. I have not really tried to roast these because honestly, they don't last that long. I usually will eat these the very second that I pick them. This plant is a pretty heavy producer. It doesn't seem to mind the heat too much, but I do have to provide shade cloth for this one because it does tend to get a little bit damaged by the sun. You'll want to provide some shade for it, either planting some taller sunflowers or amaranth around it, or maybe putting some shade cloth up. It needs support because it's an indeterminate tomato and it does get pretty big. So that one is so good. I would highly recommend that one. I tried it 3 years ago, like I said, and I will always grow this one in my garden too, just because it is such a treat. The next one is the Lizzano tomato. It's a Lizzano F1. That is a hybrid tomato, and this is one that I've talked about a lot in my shorts, and if you follow me on Instagram, I've talked about it a lot. It is a wonderful tomato. It's a cherry tomato, and it is one that kind of tumbles and really likes being in a container. I grew it last year in the garden bed, and it did okay, but it really seems to hit its stride when it's grown in a container. I grew it this year in my stock tank, and it just hangs over the sides, and it has been incredibly productive this year. It has been so productive. I have been dehydrating it, I have been eating it, I have been giving it away to people, and I still cannot keep up with this tomato, so it is amazing. The Lizzano tomato has a really classic tomato flavor. If you've ever had a really good, just very tomatoey cherry tomato, that is the one. It's juicy and just really lovely. It's a little bit bigger cherry tomato, so I will usually just slice them in half and throw them on salads, but as I said, I've roasted them, I've dehydrated them, and I've eaten them fresh, and they are just really good. The sun came out and it was blinding me, so I had to change my base of operations. The Lizzano tomato is 65 days to maturity, and it is considered a semi-determinate tomato. So I have been collecting tomatoes off of that plant for probably about a month now, and it is starting to slow down. That initial flush was pretty overwhelming. I have 4 plants in my stock tank, but after that initial flush, it has slowed down, so I'm able to keep up with it, but it is still producing. If you have a small growing space, either a container or a raised bed, or in my case, a stock tank, I think the Lizzano tomato would be a really good choice for a cherry tomato. Another new to me this year was the Juliet tomato. It is a hybrid, so it's the Juliet F1, and it is a determinate tomato. So it was also a crazy productive plant for me this year. It's starting to slow down quite a bit, so I'm starting to think about tearing those plants out and replacing them with something else for the monsoon season, but the initial flush was very productive. It is a very big and robust plant. I put some older tomato baskets on it for support because it became pretty apparent early on that it was going to be a bigger tomato, but I was out of tomato baskets, so I had to use some of the smaller old, just plain metal tomato baskets that I had had from years ago, and that was kind of a joke because that plant got so big. I actually had 2 of the plants, and they got so big that those 2 little tomato baskets, the plant just bent them in half under the weight of the plant and the weight of the fruit. So if you're going to grow the Juliet, make sure that you have plenty of space and make sure that you have a really strong support system for that plant. That being said, it produced very small, petite, kind of aroma style tomato. They were not very juicy at all. They were sweet, but not overly sweet. I found them to have not too many seeds and also to be better roasted than eating fresh, just because they weren't super flavorful or super juicy, but they were really, really good roasted. I wanted to mention them because they were so incredibly productive and also because they were so delicious roasted. Tomatoes can be used for many, many different things. Just because they're not as good to be eaten fresh does not mean that they're not great for cooking with or for roasting or for dehydrating. So the Juliet F1 tomato was definitely a really good choice for roasting. At 60 days to maturity, I think it's a really good choice for growing in the Southwest, or if you're in a cooler climate that has a shorter growing season, I think it's a really good choice for that too. All right, moving on, I have the Tidy Rose tomato, and this is the third year I've grown this, so as you can probably imagine, it is because it's a good tomato, and I really, really like this one. It will produce fruit within 60 days, and those fruits are a pink beefsteak style tomato, but they are a small beefsteak style tomato. So instead of those massive tomatoes that you can pretty much cover an entire slice of bread with, these are going to be about 5 to 7 ounces. They are pink and they are really sweet and they have a really, really nice flavor. Since they're a beefsteak tomato, they're a little more prone to cat facing, which means that they get that kind of crusty, little place in the middle where the bloom was. But otherwise, they are really, really good. You just have to clean that off and then you'll have a delicious tomato for yourself. I actually have these tomatoes growing in a stock tank and I don't have them covered at all. They are a really chunky, really robust plant and they do not seem to mind the sun or the heat at all. They've been producing and ripening fruit. They look really robust and green and healthy, no signs of diseases or pests or stress at all, and they are covered with these giant beefsteak style tomatoes and they're really good. I like using these for sandwiches just because they're a really nice size, and I know it's really hard sometimes to find tomatoes that are a bigger size to grow if you're in the southwestern region, just because it takes a longer time for those to mature. And since we're dealing with 2 short growing seasons, in the spring and then during the monsoon season, it's really hard to accommodate tomatoes with a longer amount of days to maturity, but these are really, really good. I got my seeds from Jung Seeds. That is pretty much the only place that I could find the seeds from. I got these originally as a free sample and I could not find the seeds for a little while, but I found them from Jung Seeds, so you could check those out. They need support. They are listed as an indeterminate. I have seen some articles that list them as a semi-determinate, so you can try for yourself. Sometimes these things are not quite so clear. And I decided not to support them and just to see what happened this year, and what happened was they spilled over the sides and they have become monster plants. So I would recommend using supports for these tomato plants for the Tidy Rose. As far as the flavor goes, they are very juicy. They are very sweet and flavorful. Imagine like a really good beefsteak tomato, just a little bit sweeter. So these are a great, great pick, I think, for the southwestern region or for a shorter growing season. The next tomato is new to me, and this is the Homeslice, and I think this is a really, really cute name. Now, I got these seeds free in a free sample, so I'm not sure where to recommend that you buy the seeds from. I have not looked for that, so you'll have to do a little Google search on your own for that one. They produce a smaller tomato, around 5 ounces or so. They're bigger than a cocktail size, but they're not like a full-size slicer. They have a really nice flavor. The plants have been very productive for me this year. These are a determinate plant, so they are going to produce their fruit in a short period of time, and I have planted 2 plants just because I was trying these this year and I wasn't sure if I would like them, and they've been very productive. I've gotten probably 8 or 10 off of one plant so far, and very similar amount from the other plant. So I would say these are a really, really nice plant. I do have them covered with shade cloth just because they were getting a little bit stressed from the sun and the heat. They have 63 days to maturity, which is really short, so that is great. And I would highly recommend these because these are a really nice classic tomato, not smoky, not sweet, just your basic run-of-the-mill tomato, but they have been productive and they are good and they're not mealy at all. The next one is the gold medal, and the gold medal I saved until the last because I have 2 plants that are growing right now, and I thought that they had not produced any fruit. But I was surprised when I was harvesting tomatoes yesterday to find that there was one huge fruit. So this tomato right here is the gold medal, and obviously this is my prized fruit for the spring. I think it will be interesting to see if it produces any more throughout the monsoon season. The gold medal tomato is an indeterminate tomato plant with days to maturity of 75 to 90 days, so it's a little bit on the longer side. I planted this in early spring. Like I said, I've just gotten 1 fruit off of it, but I'm actually curious to see how it performs during monsoon season. I'm hoping that it will kick into gear and that it will produce more fruits. And I mention this one just because this is such a beautiful, huge tomato. It has got a yellow blush on the stem side, and then it is kind of a pinkish red on the other side. And these plants are supposed to produce a fruit between 1 and 3 pounds. So these are a really big tomato. So I am going to slice this in half and I am going to check it out, and then I'm going to taste it. And this is the first time I've tasted it. And all of these others I've mentioned because they are just so productive. But this one was just such a beautiful tomato that I could not resist showing it to you all just because it's super fun to share it and it's new and I'm so excited about it. So let's see how it tastes. All right, let's see how this gold medal tomato tastes. That is a delicious tomato. So I would not recommend growing an entire tomato plant for just 1 tomato like this, but I wanted to share it with you because I was so excited that it was such a beautiful tomato, that it was such a really nicely sized tomato, and now I know it's a really delicious tomato as well. But I wanted to share it with you just as a bit of a suspenseful cliffhanger. Will this tomato plant end up being productive or not? I don't know. We'll have to see later on this fall. I'm hoping that it will really start producing during the monsoon season, so stay tuned to find out. This tomato is really juicy, it's really flavorful, but also sweet. And look at the center of this. It is a beautiful pink and yellow color. Just a gorgeous tomato. All right, this is by no means an extensive list. I have got a lot of other tomatoes growing. I've got some seedlings in the house that I planted specifically to plant during the monsoon season, so those will probably be going out in the garden next week. Those are all new to me. I think I have 3 or 4 different varieties that I read really good things about for performing well in the desert. So I will be sharing again, probably another taste testing format if you all like this. Let me know if you do in the comments below. But I will be sharing more tomato varieties later on in the season, probably in the fall, just to let you know about all of the other tomato varieties that I've tried. Thank you so much for letting me share these tomatoes with you. I hope that you've gotten some ideas for different kinds of tomatoes that you can grow in your garden during monsoon season or maybe next spring. I'm Kara from So Arizona. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy gardening.